In this video, we continue our journey into psychological gesture by adding qualities to them right after this. Hi, the Inspired Actor here. Sorry it's been a while. I have been juggling some much needed family vacation with implementing a new system of posting my videos, which will hopefully mean I'll be more consistent moving forward. For those of you who might be new to my channel, we are dedicated to helping actors become better artists by offering these quick, roughly 10-minute acting lessons. Also, we have about 100 of these on our channel so far, so feel free to check them out. And if you want to see more videos like these in the future, go ahead and subscribe so you'll be notified as soon as they come out. And hey, take a moment before you forget and hit that like button, as it really helps me out. And if you know people who might like these videos, please don't hesitate to share them on your social media outlet of choice. The more you progress in this work, the more the PG reveals to you the entire character in condensed form, making you the possessor and master of its unchangeable core. Michael Chekhov. This is part 2 of my series on psychological gesture, the crown jewel of the MichaelChekhov technique. If you missed part 1 and want to catch up real quick, I'll put a link to it in the notes. Briefly, we discussed that a PG is the spine of the character or scene in a condensed physical form. With practice, we can quickly and easily hone in on a useful psychological gesture, saving ourselves loads of time in our process and freeing us up to use that gesture to get at the truthful details of our scene and character in a deeper and more dynamic way. Last time, I invited you to consider the basic directionality of our character by considering their main desire or super objective. After finding a direction that appeals to you and your character, I suggested using a corresponding archetypal gesture as a means to discover that objective. How will you know that the gesture you choose will be the right one? It's right if it satisfies you as an artist. End of story. What if you discover that your gesture isn't the correct one after weeks of rehearsal or even into performance? You change it. It's okay. The gesture police will not come after you. You're always free as an artist to do pretty much anything you like, provided that it fits with the overall vision of the play set by your director, that is. Last time, I also gave you this simple formula. Archetypal gesture plus quality equals psychological gesture. We've talked at length about the first part, but not so much about the second part, so let's do that. Michael Chekhov gave us a very basic set of qualities to begin with. The 4 qualities of movement. These are based on the 4 basic forces of nature: earth, air, water, and fire. Or in Chekhovian terms, molding, flying, flowing, and radiating. I've done videos about these qualities before, so I'll be sure to include a link to those in the notes. Basically, the idea is this. By executing the basic gesture or action and adding a specific quality, in this case, molding, flying, flowing, or radiating, it will awaken a sensation inside of ourselves, which in turn provokes our feelings and will force. Let's do an example real quick so that you can see what I mean. Find a spot in the space you are in where you can move around freely. Now I invite you to execute a push AG like this. At this point, don't add any quality. We're just doing this to remind our bodies what the movement is. Now, let's do the gesture again, but this time we'll add a quality of molding. Molding is associated with the earth, so it might be helpful at first to imagine that you are pushing through thick mud. Feel free to do this a few times, remembering your feeling of ease and form until you get a sense of how doing this action and quality is affecting you. Good. Now let that go. When I do this in class, many students relate a sense of weight or heaviness with doing the gesture in this way. Some report feeling sad or especially determined. Whatever sensations or feelings you experience, please remember that they are your own. There is no right or wrong result here. How it affects you is completely reliant on your own creative imagination. Now let's try the same gesture with the quality of flying. Return to the space in your room where you can move and execute the gesture without consciously adding any quality. Now repeat the gesture with the flying quality. By the way, a lot of beginning students tend to equate molding with slow and flying with fast. However, I think that's conflating the 4 qualities of movement with tempo. Tempo is a component of the strength of the gesture, not a quality in and of itself. I'll get into all that later, but first things first. Now, if you've ever seen a sculptor using a potter's wheel, you know that molding can be a quick process at times. And a synonym for flying is soaring, which tends to imply a slower pace. So please try to think of molding, flying, flowing, and radiating as something separate from tempo. Getting back to the exercise, repeat the gesture in the quality of flying. But before you begin each gesture, try to imagine the kind of flying you are undertaking. For example, is it a quick kind of flitting about like a hummingbird or mosquito? Or is it a kind of soaring like an eagle or hawk? Notice any differences in feeling that changing the quality has evoked. Make a note of that for yourself. The more you know how each quality affects you personally, the more you can build your psychological toolkit for use in your work. As a general rule, a given psychological gesture will usually awaken pretty much the same feelings and sensations each time you do it. Your job will be to hone and adjust the gesture as necessary throughout your process and even into production so that you can ensure as truthful a performance as possible. Sometimes, though, you may find yourself doing a very different movement and quality at the end of your process that you did at the beginning. All this is perfectly normal and acceptable as long as they are the result of truthful discoveries you are making either in your work on stage or on camera or during psychological gesture exploration during rehearsals or private practice. So now that we have explored the 4 foundational qualities of movement, let's move on to tempo. As I mentioned before, tempo is a component of the strength of the gesture. Because we like to approach things scientifically, let me give you another formula. Psychological gesture equals kind plus quality plus strength. Kind is the what of the gesture, the physical movement from beginning to end. Kind awakens within us a corresponding desire. Quality is the feeling of the gesture and conjures up those corresponding emotions. Strength is the amplitude of the gesture. It determines the power or intensity of the objective or characterization awakened within the PG. Let's not rush things. I'll get to it, I promise. Let's try doing a pull with fast flying and pull slow flying to see how it affects us differently. Good. I think it's fascinating how a simple change in tempo with the gesture profoundly affects its quality. For example, a slower pull can seem more seductive or deliberate than a fast pull, which can almost seem like a shake or a grab. By the way, finding those synonyms for the archetypal gesture can really help you hone in on the spine of a character or moment in a scene. We actors work in the medium of specifics, and the more specific you can be, the more psychological gesture can awaken your imagination and will force. So use as much specific creative detail as possible, please. In fact, I recommend the book Actions, The Actor's Thesaurus by Marina Calderone as a great way to find your objectives or PGs, especially if you struggle with finding the right word, as I do. I actually use it a lot, and I'll put a link to it in the notes. Now, let's talk about rhythm as another component of the strength of the PG. Whereas tempo is how fast or slow the action might be, rhythm, on the other hand, refers to whether that action is staccato or legato. In musical terms, staccato refers to a series of short, disconnected notes, and legato refers to a longer, connected series of notes. Chekhov used these terms, staccato and legato, which is interesting because it obliges us to think of our movements as pieces of music. And while the tempo is about how long it takes us to begin and end a given gesture, it's also incredibly useful to think about how we move through space from the beginning to the end. That is the rhythm of the gesture. So let's try rip-tear in both a staccato and a legato to see what we discover. Now, a lot of people conflate tempo and rhythm, but these things are different in a very specific way. And because we are always looking to be more specific in our work, I think it's useful to explore this difference. For example, many people just say staccato is fast and legato is slow and forget about it.
Forget about it.
But that's not exactly true though, is it? You can have a series of very connected notes flowing very quickly, and you can have a series of disconnected notes that take a very long time for completion. Specifically, the time it takes you to complete your gesture is the tempo, but how you get to that completed form from the beginning to the end is the rhythm. So just for fun, let's try a fast legato and a slow staccato and see what happens. What did you get out of that? Let me know in the comments. So to sum up, Chekhov gave us a foundation of qualities to work with called the 4 qualities of movement. We can then use tempo and rhythm to further clarify our qualities, making our psychological gesture more specific and therefore increase the success of the PG to stir our imagination and will force. Please feel free to play around with this stuff and let me know what you think about it in the comments. Next time, we'll discuss even more ways to play with psychological gestures. So if you want to be the first to be notified when that video comes out, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell. See you later, colleagues.